In life, there are a lot of ways to do the same thing. Does that make one way right and the other way wrong? Sometimes, but doesn't make it any less fun. Take a look at an unconventional training of this guy in the back of the clip. Is there a right way and is there a wrong way? Well, yes, there is. Is the wrong way more fun? Well, in some circumstances, that would also be a yes. But today, I want to talk to you about something that most Christians seem to go about doing the wrong way. And I think it makes for a lot less fun, actually. Last week we started the topic of law and grace. And we learned that the laws in the Bible were never put in place to save anyone, but rather to show us just how desperately we needed the Messiah to save us. And even the people of the Old Testament, they were saved by faith in the Messiah that he was coming, not by obeying the law. The law has never saved anyone, which led to the question at the end of last week's sermon: why do we even have the law? And does the law serve any purpose for us today? Well, listen to what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew 5:17. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Jesus says that not until heaven and earth disappear will even the dot over the letter I go away. So wait a minute. We spent the entire sermon last time explaining that we are saved by grace. We are not under the law anymore. And we don't want to be under the law because we become lawbreakers and then we lose heaven because of that. But it sounds like Jesus is saying we should still follow the law. Verse 19. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the kingdom of heaven. Okay, so Jesus is telling us that the laws of the Old Testament are not to be ignored. But why? Why is the law still important if it doesn't have anything to do with salvation? Well, Paul actually addresses this in Romans chapter 7. Listen to what Paul says, Romans 7:7. What shall we say then? Is the law sinful? Certainly not. Nevertheless, I would not have known what sin was had it not been for the law. For I would not have known what coveting really was if the law had not said, you shall not covet. So Paul says the purpose of the law is to help us identify sin. It is there to help us see what is good and holy and what is not. Now apply this to what Jesus said. Jesus is not saying that we should still be following the law to earn salvation, but that we should be looking to the law to show us how to live a more holy life. Now, how much of the law does Jesus say we should be looking to? Let's read Matthew 5:18 again. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. How much of the law? All of it. All of it? That is definitely not what we as Christians do, is it? As Christians, we look at the law and then we decide which ones should still apply to us today and which ones were ones that were meant for the past. And trust me, everybody does this. Even Christians that say that they follow the law to the T, they do not. You take some of it, you say that was for then, and then other ones you say this is for now. There are 613 laws in the Old Testament. And I can promise you that you are not in favor of following all of them. Trust me. So when you don't have a true understanding of why the law exists, then what you wind up doing is grouping together laws into categories of which ones you should follow and which ones you shouldn't follow. Let me show you what I'm talking about, okay? Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 3 says, Do not eat any detestable thing. The pig is also unclean, and although it has a split hoof, it does not chew the cud. You are not to eat their meat or touch their carcass. Of all the living creatures in the water, you may eat any fish that has fins and scales, but anything that does not have fish and scales you may not eat, for it is unclean. How many of you eat pig, bacon, sausage, pork? How many of you have ever eaten clams, mussels, calamari, shrimp, lobsters, crabs? So we have laws in the Old Testament about foods that we cannot eat. What do you call these laws? Food laws. We'll group them together as food laws. So then let me ask you, in your opinion, do we follow the food laws anymore? No. Peter even says all food is clean. He declares that from God. So no, we don't follow those. But should we? Did you just ask me if we should stop eating bacon? No, what I'm saying is, as Christians, what we all do, is we say that we should follow the law. But then we throw out all the food laws. So we're not supposed to follow all the law, we're just supposed to follow some of the laws. And we keep the rest of them, don't we? Deuteronomy 15, 1 through 2. At the end of every 7 years, you must cancel debts. This is how it is to be done. Every creditor shall cancel the loan that has been made to his fellow Israelite. He shall not require payment from his fellow Israelite or brother, because the Lord's time for canceling debts has been proclaimed. Okay, do we do this law? If somebody borrows from us after 7 years, do we say, don't even worry about it anymore. Your debt is washed away. I wish we did this. I'd be borrowing money from everybody. This law is referred to as a civil law. Civil laws are how people are supposed to act towards each other as members of a particular society. Like if you're getting divorced, or if someone crashes into you, or if somebody breaks your stuff. So do we follow these civil laws as dictated by the Bible? No. No to civil laws. Well, do we follow legal laws of the Bible? Those are laws that involve offenses which are punishable if not followed. Deuteronomy 21:18. If someone has a stubborn and rebellious son who does not obey his father and mother and will not listen to them when they discipline him, his father and mother shall take hold of him and bring him to the elders at the gate of his town. They shall say to the elders, "This son of yours is stubborn and rebellious. He will not obey us. He is a glutton and a drunkard." Then all the men of his town are to stone him to death. You must purge the evil from among you. All Israel will hear it and be afraid. Okay, so this would be an example of a legal law. Do we follow the legal laws of the Bible? Should we? I mean, I'm going to be honest. Everyone has felt like stoning their children at some point in time. Legal laws? Nope. Okay, what about sacrificial laws? Do we follow the sacrificial laws? Leviticus 1:5. You are to slaughter the young bull before the Lord, and then Aaron's sons, the priests, shall bring the blood and splash it against the sides of the altar at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Do we follow the sacrificial laws? Nope. So here's the truth. When we're looking at 613 laws of the Old Testament, we toss out ceremonial laws, food laws, civil laws, cleanliness laws, priestly laws, criminal justice laws, sacrificial laws, purity laws, and more. So all of those are the no's. Which ones are the yeses then? What laws do we actually follow? Those would be the moral laws. We argue to keep the 10 Commandments and other laws which teach us what is right and wrong morally. Don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal, don't murder, honor your father and mother, respect God. So people that say we should strictly be following the law, they aren't really talking about the whole law, are they? They're just talking about some random parts of it. And depending on how you break them down, the moral laws of the Old Testament are somewhere between 50 and 200, depending upon what qualifications you give them to be considered a moral law. So let's go with the high end, okay? Let's say that there are 200 moral laws. If we are following just the moral laws, then how many of the Old Testament laws are we declaring to no longer apply to us? Yeah. We keep 200 laws and toss out 413 laws. We certainly throw out the overwhelming majority of them. And the hardest part of taking on this mentality of just following the moral laws is the picking and choosing which laws we are meant to follow and which laws we no longer have to follow. And the reason that's so tough is because they're not broken down by category. We're the ones who categorize them. Leviticus 19 is one of my favorite sections to take people to show just how silly the idea of keeping some laws is while getting rid of others. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to read some of these laws, and then I want you to think about what category of law they fall into. So I will read the law, and then we can assign it into a category and say yes or no as to whether we are supposed to be following it. Now, this is based upon the fact that we're only following moral laws, okay? And these are all grouped together. Leviticus 19, starting at verse 3, says, "Each of you must respect your mother and father, and you must observe my Sabbaths. I am the Lord your God." Okay, so those are moral laws, and we say yes, right? All right, verse 4, "Do not turn to idols or make metal gods for yourselves. I am the Lord your God." And this is idolatry, and yes, we follow this. Okay, so this isn't as hard as I thought. Okay, verse 5, "When you sacrifice a fellowship offering to the Lord, sacrifice it in such a way that it will be accepted on your behalf. It shall be eaten on the day of the sacrifice or on the next day. Anything left over until the third day must be burned up." So this is a sacrificial law, and do we follow it? No. Verse 9, "When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather gleanings of your harvest. Do not go over your vineyard a second time or pick up the grapes that have fallen. Leave them for the poor and the foreigner. I am the Lord your God." Okay, so this is a civil law or an agrarian law, a food law. Do we follow this one? No. Verse 11, "Do not steal, do not lie, do not deceive another." Moral law? Yes, right? "Do not swear falsely by my name and so profane the name of your God. I am the Lord." Moral law? Yes. "Do not defraud or rob your neighbor. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight." Okay, so first we got a moral law, so we would say yes. And the second one is a civil law, so that would be no. That's two different laws in one verse. Verse 15, "Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly." Okay, so that's a legal law, so we'd say no, right? Let's jump to verse 19. "Keep my decrees. Do not mate different kinds of animals. Do not plant your field with two kinds of seed. Do not wear clothing woven of two kinds of material." Animal laws? No. Agrarian laws? No. Purity laws? No. You know what? I bet that some of you sinners out there right now aren't even wearing 100% cotton. Shame on you. Verse 27, "Do not cut the hair at the sides of your head or clip off the edges of your beard." This is actually a pagan law against paganism, and I would say no. But you know what makes me chuckle? No Christian has a problem with a guy getting a haircut and using the clippers on the sides of his head. But the same Christians who have no problem with that will quote the next verse as if it's something that we are supposed to be following. So don't worry about the clippers, but verse 28, "Do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord." So you can get a haircut, but don't you dare get a tattoo. How do we justify that? They're one verse apart. How do you pick one and then throw out the other one? And I could keep on going on and on, but I think you get the point. It is impossible and slightly ridiculous to believe that as Christians we are smart enough to one by one go through all of the laws and keep the ones that we want to keep and get rid of the ones that we don't. And does this sound like what Jesus was talking about when he said that until heaven and earth disappear, that not the least stroke of a pen would get tossed out of the law? I mean, we're tossing out entire verses, sections, and chapters. We throw out 413 laws. That is way more than the least stroke of a pen. But then what's our other option? Do we just throw them all out? Or do we go to the other end of the spectrum and start sacrificing animals again? Remember that in Matthew 5:19, Jesus said, "Therefore anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called the least in the kingdom of heaven. But whoever practices in teaching these commands will be called great in the kingdom of heaven." Does that sound like someone who wants to throw out the law? Or even 2/3 of it. Well, if we're not throwing it out, but we can't do them all, and we also can't pick and choose which ones we want, then what's the other option? Okay, so remember how I told you there are multiple ways to do things? Well, in this situation, there's only one right way. And let me advocate the right option to you. Here's the correct stance. We keep and use the whole thing. The whole thing. We keep it and we use it. 2 Timothy 3:16 says, all scripture is God-breathed and is useful for teaching, rebuking, correcting, and training in righteousness, so that the servant of God may be thoroughly equipped for every good work. All scripture. This includes every law in the Old Testament. And remember why the law was put in place to begin with, according to Paul, to show us what is holy and to show us what is sinful. That means every single law in the Bible has something to show us about sin. Some of them are very straightforward in their ways, but others are in a way that require a little bit of thought. For example, let's jump back into Leviticus 19 again and take a look at all those laws that we were throwing out to see what they can teach us. Because this is what we're trying to do, folks. Not follow these laws to the T, but instead take these important laws that God has put down and find God's heart in them, to see what we're supposed to see and how we can apply that to our current situation. Leviticus 19, each of you must respect your mother and father, and you must observe my Sabbaths. What does it teach us? Parents are important. 4, do not turn idols or make metal gods for yourselves. I am the Lord your God. Teaches us God should be first. 5, when you sacrifice a fellowship offering to the Lord, sacrifice it in such a way that it will be accepted on your behalf. Now, we're not literally supposed to sacrifice, but it still can teach us what's supposed to teach us. When we give to God, do it with a grateful heart. Jump to verse 9. When you reap the harvest of your land, do not reap to the very edges of your field or gather the gleanings of your harvest. Are we supposed to do that literally? No. But what can it teach us? Take care of the needy. Do not hold back the wages of a hired worker overnight. Give to people what you have promised them. Do not curse the dead or put a stumbling block in front of the blind, but fear your God. I am the Lord. Be kind to others. Do not pervert justice. Do not show partiality to the poor or favoritism to the great, but judge your neighbor fairly. Do not let money cloud your judgment. Are you seeing what we're supposed to be doing with this law? Not throwing them away, but seeing what God was trying to teach us through them. Verse 19, keep my decrees. This teaches us God's laws still have much to teach us. Do not wear clothing woven of 2 kinds of materials. Stay separate and holy. People should be able to see a difference between you and the rest of the world. Do not mingle those two together. 28, do not cut your bodies for the dead or put tattoo marks on yourselves. I am the Lord. Do not mess with spirits or the dead. It's something that you shouldn't play around with. 32, stand up in the presence of the aged. Show respect for the elderly. Do we have to do that specifically? No, but it teaches us the elderly have seen and experienced more than you, so listen to what they have to say. Do you get it? See, we're tossing away all of these laws that have so much to teach us. And if we would just take a stop for a minute, instead of saying, let's follow it to the T, or saying, let's throw them all away, but instead say, yes, let's use them all, they will help us see the heart of God and his desires. And it doesn't mean they're meant to be followed in a literal way. It is meant to be done in a way that looks for the reason behind the law. So some of them are literal. Others are there just to teach you about God's heart. The ceremonial laws with all of the Jewish celebrations, they have so much to teach us. The sacrificial laws and how they pointed to Jesus, they have so much to teach us. Even the cleanliness laws, they have so much to teach us. And the moral laws as well have so much to teach us. All 613 commands and laws are inspired and useful for discerning what is good and holy. So it's time to put them back in our Bible and use them as God intended. And how did he intend that? So that we would have a better picture of his heart. Do you get it? Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Take care. God bless. Hope to see you soon.